there's this idea of what a prosecutor is. There's this idea that when you get a case, the first thing is, it's the drama of the crime itself, and it comes in and the prosecutor's there, and they're just like, oh, we're on fire, we're going to go forward, and we're going to hammer this guy, and we'll get to the sentencing, and we're done, and the movie's over. And that's your typical view of most people in prosecutors. But the thing is, really the last 30 years, there's really been a movement within prosecutors and offices throughout the United States, and really looking at, from a different model, how do we problem solve our way out of the situation? It's not just about how do we just prosecute somebody, how do we case manage these criminals who come into our system and labeling this is who they are and that's what they shall be forevermore. It's really stopping the system and asking yourself, hey, can you prevent crime? Can you stop this? Can this be a one and done? Now, in the city of Phoenix, we're a municipal court. We're misdemeanors. We don't do felonies. It's just misdemeanors. So the idea at a lower level is to think about, hey, can you be one and done? Don't people make mistakes? And can you guide them out of the system so they don't have to come back? Can you problem solve? And so really what you're looking at is if you start with this idea of problem solving in furtherance of public safety, you start with the premise, a mission, if you will. We're going to solve problems. And then you use research. If you don't know how you solve problems, who do you go to? Right? You go to law school, what they teach you to do is do what? Not much. They just kind of get you in there, and then you take the bar, and then you learn later. But basically how to think, in some schools, how to argue if you take the right courses and so on. But problem solving, a little bit different. There's critical analysis of how you look at a case, but look from a societal standpoint, can you look at certain cases and so on and ask the question, can we solve this problem? Can this defendant be one and done? Can we do that? And so you got to start with the research. What's out there? What other people are doing? What are your academic institutions telling you? The different schools of thought that are out there. Because prosecution is just the beginning. When you get to the sentencing phase, if you get a conviction, the idea for sentencing is not just to hammer. Now, you may want to, but the idea really is to really think about, is this the appropriate sentence that will create what we're looking for in resolving the issue for the long haul? Now, does that mean that person may go to jail? It may be, but if you're going to put them on probation, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to do counseling? Do you want them to engage? Do you want them to do something that causes them to write a letter, to talk about reflection, about what they did, why do you do it, and so on? So it can't be just jail alone. You can't just, as people say, you can't incarcerate your way out of the problem. It has to be more. There has to be more. So what you're looking for sentencing is stabilization. You have to look at your victim, make sure your victim is taken care of, made whole again. But you're looking at the stabilization of the defendant and the community at large. And so what does that look like? Well, sometimes when you're looking at the research, it will say, look at this individual. Perhaps the way for this individual is not to go to court, but to divert them out of the system. Because the research will tell you, in many cases, that most people have made a mistake, especially at a misdemeanor level, and that you can get them in a better trajectory through counseling and the like so they don't come back again. Well, that makes a lot of sense, but how would you know unless you deal with what? Researchers. They're kind of scary people, but you still have to deal with them. You still do. And so we talk to them, and the idea is, how can you increase quality of life? Can you imagine prosecutors getting together and asking the question, how can we improve the quality of life of our communities? Don't we have a say in that? Shouldn't we be part of that discussion? Shouldn't we be there at the table for those type of arguments and the like? How do we move society? And so let's just look at domestic violence. One of the things we did in domestic violence is we had a Lieutenant Robbie Bates who kind of looked at how DV cases were being handled by police, and they were being handled all the same way. So 15,000 cases a year, they come to the prosecutor's office, we do horizontal, which basically says, you look at the case, how many priors they have, if they don't have priors, some will be eligible diversion and like, but you're not really looking at the case as an individual. So for instance, you have a defendant, first time in our system, where his beloved or her beloved strangled the victim. Victim calls police, but no marks were left. No marks were left. Class 3 misdemeanor, lowest form. At the same time, you have a guy whose first offense, he got really upset, and he just kind of, she pushed him, he pushed her, witness saw him push her, same thing. But what we know from the research, from the issue of lethality, the person who strangles that individual completely dynamic, completely different dynamics. We're talking about an individual who would probably more likely go 0 to 60 like that, who would make a decision like that and end that life, versus the person who's just back and forth. So you got to treat that defendant differently. And so what do? We take the one from a group 3 perspective, a low risk assessment, and divert them out. The group 1, you got to pay attention to that. Mind you, they came in the system the same way, first offense, but you have to look at the cases differently, individually, not as a cattle call. That's what the research does. And so the next question then is, does diversion work? As a prosecutor, I want to know whatever program we're sending them to, it has to work. Because why do it? And so what we did is we found this guy in Arizona State University, Jose Ashford. He just happens to be a professor of School of Social Work, director of the Office of Forensic Social Workers Research Training, director of the Office of, he has so many directors, we thought, that's the guy. That's the guy. So we had him come over and do the research. He pulled all the research, a couple years of individuals going through it, and he found, with help of students and the like, that about 5% reoffended after completing the program. That's pretty good. That's pretty good for a diversion program. But that's not all of it. Who's my 5%? Guess what? Our 5% are usually individuals who are 18 to 26 years old, unemployed, disconnected, and their likelihood of recommitting another offense is about 6.5 times more likely to reoffend within that year. They drop out of the program and they're more likely to reoffend, and not only just reoffend, but do so in such a manner that's more violent. So we can celebrate 95, but I got 5% I still got to deal with, because there's another victim out there waiting. And the idea is not to have victims. That's the idea. And so, but you won't find these answers unless you partner with an institution who can do the research, because we don't have the capability of doing that. We just don't. We have to know what works and what doesn't work so we can be more effective. If we are looking to problem solve in the furtherance of public safety, how else can you do it if you don't work with the researchers to tell us how can we refine what we do to be more effective? And don't, from my perspective, doesn't the victim deserve that? And so we did the same thing with our prostitution diversion program. What we had was a prostitution diversion program that was founded by former prosecutors that came to our office. The prosecutor at the time thought, well, nothing else was working. Why not give it a try? Because what it used to be, you arrest them, you prosecute them, you put them in jail for 180 days, they're back on the street. And you do this whole cycle again. And if you're the police officer, what are you thinking? There she is again. Back to your point, what are you doing? You're that bias that goes in there. She's just, this is what she is. You label them. That's all she is. And so we took a risk, had some criticism for doing it. But what we found after several years of tweaking it and working with the providers, we went to Dominique Rose-Lipowitz. And again, we were always looking for PhDs, and she had that. And so, oh, great. We'll use her. She did the analysis, and what we found, only 14% of those who completed the program would reoffend after a year. It was the best in the nation of impacting human being lives to get them off the street and changing the trajectory of their lives. Why is the prosecutor's office even caring about that? Isn't our job just to prosecute? Shouldn't we just be confined to just that role in society? And so the argument is no. We want to solve the problem. We want to solve it. So what's the rest of the story? Well, let's look at the 86% who survived. Those are 86% of those individuals who went through the program who did not reoffend, who were able to take that label off, that scarlet letter, whatever you want to call that bias against them. There's one individual who came to Phoenix. She came here looking for a job, didn't find a job, found herself in a domestic violence situation, was at a shelter, found a gentleman who was kind-hearted and started helping her. And then he got abusive again. And then she found herself back on the street, and then he was pimping her out, using drugs, doing everything he can to control her. Now, she was not in control because she was in an abusive relationship, and the use of drugs to keep her in that line of business for him. The great thing of having professors like Dr. Sepowitz is she came out with an idea with some help with some others. Perhaps we can, instead of arresting them, perhaps we provide them services before we arrest them. And this individual took those services
And she was able to extricate herself from this abusive relationship. And now she's fully employed, back in school, proud mother, runs marathons, changing lives. Why should we as prosecutors be engaged in that? Why should we be looking for the Rose Sepowitz of the world to help us? That's not her, though. I'm just telling you right now. Right now. So problem solving. So it got me to start thinking, can we problem solve backwards? Can we move backwards? Why do we wait for the crime? Why wait? Can't we work with partners out there and look at the research and ask ourselves, what does it say? How do we prevent? How do we intervene in lives to change that which other people say they will always be that kid? That's their lot in life. Can you not change that? And so you've had these popular, I call these popular statistics that you find on the internet. They say about literacy and so on, and you can read that. But for us as prosecutors, we need to know the truth of the matter. We need to know whether this is correct. Because if we're going to engage our time and resources, we got to make sure what we're seeing is correct. Engagement. And so for us, it's a new role. Suppose we work with NGOs, educational providers. We look at the research. We work with our communities. We help communities self-govern. It's not for us to tell them what their problems are. It's for them to tell us what their problems are. You set the agenda as the community, and let us help you solve your problems. But you're the voice. You govern. We respond. You tell us where you want us to work, who to work with. And then through that, what happens, what I have found, is that you develop relationships. We're in the criminal justice system, but we have relationships with schools, with superintendents, with NGOs. And who do they call? They call us to help them problem solve. They look to us as a partner. We develop those relationships with those community members. They develop those short-term wins. And then they start believing, yes, this neighborhood is not designed to be a failing neighborhood. Those schools are not designed to be a failing school. You can change those dynamics, but you have to engage. You have to be part of the solution. So that's why, for me, I mean, what would happen if we would work with these Title I schools that are out there? What would happen if we just said, this Title I school district, we're going to work there? Could we stimulate those discussions? Can we do that? Can we reduce crime? Can we look at that? And what would the research say if we started this as a premise? Could we gather? So that was the idea, to form a new collaboration. Suppose we created the Southwest Center for Advancement of Justice, where you combine College of Education, combine School of Social Work, criminology, criminal justice, law school, oh, those guys, psychology. Suppose you put them together in the same room and start really brainstorming to say, look, we're going to take one school district and we're going to work and see what we can affect change, working with the community, changing the social context, changing trajectories of those kids. It doesn't have to be. That's the point from a prosecutor's role. You don't have to have crime. You really don't. You can engage and change people. That's what the research tells me. That all you need is a caring adult and you can change a young man's life. You can do that, but you have to engage. We have a role, I believe, as prosecutors to engage. Now, we'll still be in court, but there's another part of us that should be in the preventing side, intervention side, moving people in that direction. And what I propose is not easy. In fact, it's hard. But that's why we do it. Easy stuff, that doesn't interest me. But when you move to the hard, that which others say can't be done, I say we do. I say we do. The only thing I'm missing is a Tier 1 research institution. If I can find one, let me know if there's one anywhere around here. I'll take one of those. But if you have that power in your state, why not use it? Why not collectively gather together and let's move society? Not just expect that there has to be crime. Let's change that dynamic. I can think of no better place than Arizona to start that. And so that's what I'm looking at you for, because I can't do it, but collectively we can. And I guess the question is, do you think we can? I got one nod. Can we? I got two. This is kind of like how we do auctions, by the way. But that's the bottom line. if there's ever there was, when you connect human beings, and I'll leave you with this real quick. When I talk to students, especially in business, about ethics and so on, one of the things I always ask them is, what's the most important toy ever invented? And they tell me everything in Nintendo and so on. I said, no, really, it's Legos. The beauty of Legos is different colors, they connect and so on. And you can build anything when you have the vision. Human beings are the same way. Once you take human beings and you start connecting them to a vision, you can go to the moon, you can go to Mars, you can go anywhere. But you got to connect. And once we start doing that, all bets are off. We'll make it happen. Thank you.